This video is an overview of the Unit 3 Paraphrasing Assignment for English 101. So for this assignment, you are going to submit a Word document with one quote that you are then going to paraphrase and then provide a reason or justification for selecting that passage to paraphrase. And the first one needs to come from reading the bots article. And then you're going to do the exact same thing, one quote with a paraphrase and your justification for selecting it for the source that you found at the end of Unit 2 in the Information Literacy Assignment. So what I'm calling R3. Now keep in mind, you're going to be using both of these articles in the Unit 3 paper. And so you want to be really mindful of which quotes that you pick, okay? And we'll take a look at the sample in a little bit, but just keep in mind the sample is going to be different than our readings. So for this assignment, we're going to be doing it because our Unit 3 essay is going to require us to paraphrase source material. And in fact, APA style does require that when students are incorporating source material in an essay, that the vast majority of evidence be paraphrased. So we already did a direct quote back in Unit 1, and now we're going to do more with paraphrasing. You do not want to accidentally plagiarize when you paraphrase. So this assignment is going to demonstrate your understanding of the requirements of paraphrasing and citing information from source material when you paraphrase. So you may find it beneficial to go ahead and look ahead at the summary response essay assignment, because in this essay, you are going to have to respond to the bots article. So at the end of your database exploration assignment at Unit 2, you did have to select two quotes and explain how they were connected. Also, you had to kind of discuss what you agreed or disagreed with. And so all of these little assignments are building to this summary response essay. The first part of the essay, you're just going to summarize the bots article. But in the second part of the essay, you are going to have to respond in agreement and disagreement to multiple points that are made in the bots article. And in your response, somewhere you are going to have to incorporate that article that you found during the previous assignment at the end of Unit 2. And so thinking about what you've already done and thinking ahead about what it is you have to do, you really want to think about identifying quotes and explaining those quotes in a way that you might be able to use it later on in this unit in your summary response essay, okay? So really pay close attention to what you have to respond to in this essay and think, okay, what do I agree with? What do I disagree with? How can I incorporate the article I found from that database assignment? And then select quotes that are going to fit those parameters. That would be my recommendation. So you'll want to take a look at the paraphrasing reference guide. Okay, so if you haven't done any paraphrasing in a long time, you're going to make sure that you take a look at this. The key to paraphrasing is that you are restating what the author says in your own words, but you really have to make it sound like you. You can't just switch out 2 or 3 words. You need to completely rewrite the entire idea. So if the quote that you pick is 2 or 3 sentences, you have to paraphrase all of those sentences so that it sounds like you. So some tips for effective paraphrasing. Do not add personal opinion. You are only restating what the author says. Make sure you're not only changing the wording, but you're also changing the sentence structure. So you're moving information around, keeping the intent of the original, not changing its meaning. Paraphrasing also requires an APA style citation. Even though you are putting the information in your own words, that idea does not belong to you. You read it in one of your texts. Therefore, you still have to give credit to the author. Now, sometimes you can't change every single word from the original. Sometimes you just have to use the exact words, and that's okay. All right, you just have to put quotation marks around it, especially if it's like 2 or 3 words. Now, if it's just a word that describes the topic, then you can change it. So for example, R2, the title bots. You wouldn't want to use the word bots. You would use something like artificial intelligence, right? But then other times, you may not be able to change a word. So if I'm reading an article about nuclear war, I can't change the term nuclear war. It is what it is. But generally, we want to avoid reusing entire phrases from the original. A paraphrase is not a summary. Paraphrases are oftentimes just as long as the original, and depending on your paraphrasing, sometimes it's a little bit longer, okay? So we always have to include our APA citation, okay? Now, APA guidelines for paraphrasing say author's last name and the year. You don't necessarily have to include the page or paragraph number. That's required when you do a direct quote, but it's not required when you paraphrase. So please make sure you keep these tips in mind. Now, if you need more help with paraphrasing or citing a paraphrase, or you just want to take a look at examples, make sure you utilize that reference guide that's linked in the assignment. So the directions for how you're going to do this assignment are all listed here. So first, you're going to put the quotation mark with a proper setup or signal phrase. You're going to put it in quotation marks. You're going to do a parenthetical or narrative citation. Under that, you're going to write your paraphrasing. And even though you're paraphrasing, we still need some sort of setup. We still need a parenthetical or narrative citation. Then the reason. Why did you select this quote? Is it something you agree or disagree with? And remember, you want to try to pick something that you can reuse a little bit later on when you write your summary and response essay. So you should be picking something from the BOTS article that you agree or disagree with, and then see what you can find in the reading you found that would directly connect back to what it is that you chose from the BOTS article. Then you'll be able to reuse some of that when you get into your essay for this unit. So let's take a look at the sample assignment that's linked here. And really what you can do is you can just use this as a model for the assignment, the document you're going to turn in. So my first entry, obviously the readings are different. Our reading number 2 is the BOTS article. So you would list that. You have to have some sort of setup before your direct quote, and then your citation with the author's last name, the year, and then the paragraph number. Then you're going to paraphrase that quote from the BOTS article. Again, making sure you have some sort of setup. In this case, the setup is a narrative citation, so we have the author's name and the year, and then it is rewritten. So we take what the quote says and completely rewrite it, even changing up the order of information a little bit. Then justification. This is the reason for selecting this passage, why you selected it. And remember, focus on a passage from the BOTS article that you agree or disagree with, so that way you can use some of this when you write your response paper. So if you do a really good job explaining, why you selected that passage, why you agree or disagree with it, you might be able to reuse some of this justification in that later essay, okay? Then you're going to do the entry for the reading you found. And this is the reading you found at the end of Unit 2 when we did that information literacy database assignment. So we're calling that reading 3. So everybody's reading 3 is going to be a little bit different based on what they found for that database assignment. But you're going to do the exact same process. You're first going to do a quote, keeping in mind you must include a setup for the direct quote, and then where that was cited. And the reason it says as cited in this one is because the article is Jacobs and Farago as the author, but notice how they're quoting museum directors. So the person who actually said this direct quote here are the museum directors, where the citation, we still need the author. So we just add the phrase as cited in. That's a really easy little trick to use. You can quote anyone you want, But if the speaker of the quote is different than the author of the article, technically you have to cite the speaker in the setup, and then you can use as cited in your citation. So now we have the paraphrase of that direct quote, and notice we have the citation, narrative citation. This is a parenthetical citation at the end. This is a narrative citation at the beginning, and referring to who was actually speaking in the direct quote and then what they said. Then we have the justification for why that quote was chosen. So again, if I'm looking ahead to my summary and response essay, I know I have to use reading 3 in order to make a connection to reading 2. So if I'm going to agree with something reading 2 said, I might incorporate reading 3 as additional support. It's like, oh, look, I agree with this and I'm not the only one. Here's what this person says. Or vice versa, if I'm going to disagree with something that reading 2 says, maybe I find additional support for that disagreement or additional evidence for why that idea is bad and why I disagree with it in my third reading. I strongly encourage you, when you're selecting what it is you're going to quote for this assignment and what it is you're going to paraphrase, pick something that you can use later on in that essay. So this assignment is going to be the first assignment of Unit 3. So we're continuing with our article from our previous unit, our bots article. One quote, paraphrase, and justification from that article, and one quote, paraphrase, and justification for the one you located at the end of our last unit. And then that way you can start to think, okay, I know I'm going to have to respond. And you'll be responding to the bots article. So that's the one that's driving the bus, right? The other reading you found is just to help you in that response. So make sure you're picking something from the bots article that you want to agree or disagree with first, and then go into your article you found and find some additional support for that agreement or disagreement. So make sure, if you want a more in-depth look at the summary response essay, you can click here, and the paraphrasing example assignment right here, make yours look like this. That's the easiest way I can tell you. That way it's very clear to me what's from our second reading and then what's from the reading you found, okay? But as a part of the grading, you have to have a setup for your direct quote. You have to have either a parenthetical citation or a narrative citation. You have to have, more than 1 or 2 sentences about why you selected it. So make sure that you are providing adequate information as you complete this assignment. And then what you'll do is you'll just submit the Word document that you type up for this assignment, and that's what I'll be grading. And if you want to take a look at the rubric itself, all you have to do is click here and you'll see, did you have a setup? Do you have citations? Do you use your own words and sentence structure? Do you have a setup? Do you have a citation? It's close to the same length. It captures all the original meaning. And then your reason. Okay, so all of those components are going to be graded. So make sure that you put time and effort into all 3 of these elements of the assignment. As always, reach out if you have any questions, and let me know how I can help.